NextGen Talks is an initiative of PwC Nigeria's NextGen Club, featuring family business owners, NextGens, successful entrepreneurs, and professionals. NextGen Talks, shaping the African family business narrative.
Welcome to episode 4 of NextGen Talks, an initiative of PwC Nigeria's NextGen Club. My name is Chinasa Collins Ogwo, and I'm the host for this podcast. The annals of entrepreneurial ventures appear littered with false starts, and rather than engaging the rhythmic flow from an unbroken composition of music that folks can dance to, participants seem inundated by an awkward cacophony of ominous, sporadic sounds. This poetic expression of the peculiarities of entrepreneurship in Africa is an excerpt from the introductory chapter of the book titled In Pursuit, Journeys in African Entrepreneurship, co-authored by two friends whom I happen to know and have interacted with in the course of my career. The book chronicles their entrepreneurship journeys and, as stated in the introductory chapter, aims to give a true and complete picture on what it takes to thrive in business on the continent of Africa. Joining me shortly on this episode is one of the co-authors of In Pursuit, Journeys in African Entrepreneurship, Oswald Guobadia, to share his perspective on entrepreneurship in Africa. Oswald Guobadia is currently the Senior Special Assistant to His Excellency, President Muhammadu Buhari, on digital transformation. He is the lead on the Nigeria Startup Bill, NSB, a project that is strategic to the growth of Nigeria's tech ecosystem and digital economy. Oswald was just recently appointed as the director on the board of Edo Innovates, the engine hub to drive technology and innovation in Edo State by providing strategic policy guidance, leverage on skills development, investment promotion, and tech advancements in the state. His ultimate goal is to influence the economic narrative of Africa for good through helping to build sustainable businesses that contribute to economic development, job creation, and also thrive inclusively in an interactive ecosystem. As an African who is passionate about addressing development issues, he believes that startups and SMEs must take the lead to unlock potential, drive and sustain economic value on the continent. Before Oswald comes on, please listen to our NextGen Talks nugget for this episode.
The NextGen Talks nugget for this episode is: North Stars build businesses that last. They select the right structure for their business and choose board members and partners wisely. Starting a business may be spontaneous, but down the line, the roles, responsibilities, and equity structure of the business, and even how to resolve conflicts, must be properly delineated.
Welcome, Oswald, and thank you for coming on NextGen Talks.
Hey, thank you. It's always good to be here.
Fantastic. Always. Have you ever been on this podcast?
No, I haven't, but we've had a chat before, right?
Yes, we have. And I know you. I've known you for a while now, and it's interesting having these kind of interactions. So I've known you when I was in banking, and both of us are no longer... Well, no, you were not in banking. You were my client.
Yes, exactly. But I was supporting banks, so that's what's confusing about that. It's multi-layered, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so my business supports
so
banks.
Yeah. Okay. So the NextGen Talks nugget for this episode was North Stars build businesses that last, an excerpt from your book, actually. They select the right structure for their businesses and choose board members and partners wisely. Can you just shed more light on that quote, which is an excerpt from your book, In Pursuit?
Yeah, so basically, I'll take that back a little bit to, what's a North Star?
Very good.
Right? So a North Star is somebody you look up to. So when we thought of the phrase, although I've heard it used in different ways, we actually pictured a baby in the prom looking up at, the mobile toys in the prom, right? So that's going to be a constellation above you.
Right.
So as adults working now, we kind of see ourselves with people above us that we look at and say, this is who I want to emulate on different things, right? Mm-hmm. So you may want to emulate, Mr. X on how he treats his kids. Mm-hmm. Or you may want to emulate Mr. P on how he treats his wife.
Yeah.
And then you may have a mentor who you love how he runs his business and how he interacts with his staff.
Right.
And that's who you emulate, right?
Okay.
So the idea of that chapter was particularly saying, put together a constellation for yourself.
Okay.
Right? That helps set your path exactly what stars do, right? So they help you set a path.
Yeah.
So it all kind of plays together, right? So you put together a bunch of people who are your stars, your North Stars, and actually helps you lead you to where you want to go. And you actually get to trim that constellation depending when your direction changes.
Right, I see.
Right? So when you're in banking, I'm sure there was one banker there who were like, wow, when I become, I want to be her or I want to be him.
Yeah.
But then when you change into entrepreneurship, that person no longer serves the purpose anymore because they're not North Star for you. Exactly.
Changing.
So your direction has changed. So that's what we meant by that. So to answer your question more directly, is basically looking for somebody who has set up their business in a way that you admire.
Right.
Right. So we kind of gave some examples, boards, of course. So these are all things you want to do for your company, right? So you want your company to have the right board, so you get the right feedback and the right interaction board to executive interaction. You want to treat your staff well,
right,
and so forth. So it's key to look for people who have sat on boards and say, okay, this is the kind of, like, I have an age mate of mine who has been on several boards.
Right.
I look at her as my North Star. If I ever get a board of that caliber, she's the first person I go speak to and say, hey, what should I do? What should I watch out for?
Okay.
What do you think? So she's like, she's been a North Star for a very long time. And that's something about North Stars. They don't have to be older.
Right.
She's
it's
actually my age mate. Yeah. She's actually my age mate. So her exposure is different from my exposure.
Right.
So from that perspective, I look at her as a North Star for a lot of things.
Okay. That's interesting, and I like the North Star analogy, and it sounds to me, if we're going to just put that simply, is like a mentor, right? But then it's not a mentor because you don't necessarily, is it like, it's from a distance, so it's someone you look up to and you're learning from afar.
So the problem with mentorship is that it's often misplaced.
Okay.
So what happens is that you have a North Star, you don't necessarily have to approach them.
Okay.
Right? So what happens in our environment, in our marketplace, is that people always feel they need to approach their North Stars. They make that a target.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that guy, I look up to him, so therefore he must be my mentor.
Okay. Is that a bad thing?
I wouldn't use the word bad, but I would say it's not very effective. So mentorship is about a relationship.
True.
Right? And mentorship goes two ways. There are people I call my mentor who I've done more for.
Right.
Right? But the day that I actually need them, that advice, that key advice that goes left or right, that's when they step in. So mentorship is about relationships. So it's rather difficult to mentor people if you don't understand them, if you don't develop a relationship. Sure. Right? Otherwise, what's my advice based on? Right? So I have to know, so you have to really know that this person you're speaking to, their faults to some extent.
Yeah.
So there's never a one-sided issue when they come and say, oh, my boss said this to me today. Like, what did you do?
You have like a full picture.
Exactly. So you have to have a full picture for real mentorship.
Right.
Not to say there are not different variants of it that actually works for some people, but I think one of the key problems is that we always feel like we need to approach our North Stars.
Okay.
Like the age mate of mine that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
She doesn't know she's my North Star. Right? I may have joked with her about it years ago, but it's not like there's nothing formal about you being my North Star.
Yeah.
But I know in my constellation that when I look up at my constellation, I can think, this person's there. Right? And there are other people, and some people have been trimmed away and some other people have been added to it. So there's a distance to it.
Right. So what is it about, the statement is North Stars build businesses that last, and my interpretation of that is only North Stars can actually build lasting businesses. What is it about a North Star?
So it's very personal to some extent, right?
Okay.
So it's a very strong statement saying North Stars, right? So being that the book was written for, a range of people, right? When you say North Stars, it's like almost telling the answer, right? Like North Stars don't build businesses. So read the opposites, right? So North Stars don't build businesses that don't last, and they don't pick bad people in their boards, and they don't treat their staff terribly, right? I think there's some parts of the chapter where we actually describe what we feel, so there's a phrase in the book that says the faces of a North Star.
Okay.
Right? So it's kind of helping you along to say, try to find the character that you are actually attracted to, that you believe is who you want to emulate. Right?
True.
Right?
Survive in this
Yeah.
street.
So this is not the time you're going to pull up the Pope as your North Star.
Yeah.
This is not the time you're going to pull up I'm not saying you're going to do something aggressive or violent, but you have to have a certain mindset.
Right.
That a certain North Star may not match. So you better be pulling on that North Star that you know is a bit gra-gra at that moment.
Yeah.
That's what you need.
For that situation.
So you have various people. They're not all good people, right? That's not the point.
Yeah.
Right? I think
About
that point.
what fits the situation.
Exactly.
So it's like different personas.
Exactly.
Right.
So that point needs to be clear, because I think it's very easy to think North Stars are all nice people.
That's what I was thinking.
No. So for that North Star, you're there for how he treats his people at work.
Right.
And he probably will be instructive for you to understand the delineation of why he's two different people.
Very important.
Just for you to understand why that is. But
Yeah.
but if you see how he manages his office, maybe there's something that you want to learn. Right? So maybe he's a North Star for a while, maybe he's
Yeah.
a North Star for not a long
Yeah.
time. But just to give you that, North Stars aren't meant to be nice people. That's not the objective.
That's not the objective. They're just meant to help you deliver the results that you're after.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that clarity. That really did help. Okay, so I'd like to just ask you to share what you think the African entrepreneurship journey is about. And I ask that because the focus of this episode is how we can shift the narrative of entrepreneurship in Africa. And with your book, the title is very apt, In Pursuit and Journeys of Entrepreneurship in Africa.
Yeah.
So what is the African entrepreneurship journey and how is it different from entrepreneurship journeys in other parts of the world?
So, one of the key things I tell people, I say that, when you're doing business in Nigeria and Africa, you're building the very next step, right?
Okay.
So, and anybody, somebody would say, well, how is that different from Silicon Valley, right? So you're creating something that never existed before.
Right.
But there's the arena on our continent is rather different. So there's so many different examples. So you can't pay rent for just 1 month, right? So if you're trying to start the same business that you're doing in Silicon Valley, the same business in Nigeria you're paying rent for the entire year.
Or 2 years.
Or
3 years, in fact.
Exactly. You're buying a gen, right? You're doing all these things.
Right.
While the guy in Silicon Valley can use his credit card, so that extends his capacity and ability.
Right.
So some of these ideas came to me. I was listening to an entrepreneur, he's a guy who, I don't need to say who he is, but he basically created an app that everybody was using.
Right.
And he was doing this talk where he was talking about how he started his business, right? And he makes it right off. I wanted to listen because I use the app myself.
Yeah.
So I wanted to listen to him, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to be inspired. And right off the bat, he said something. He said, when I started, it was so difficult. I was living off my credit cards. Click. That's when I stopped listening. Right? Because I couldn't relate to that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, don't get me wrong. I have a sort of dual lifestyle. I have credit cards, but,
Yeah.
they're
that's
abroad.
that's not the true picture.
That's not the real
of-
experience here, right?
correct.
So that's not the real experience here. So one of the biggest problems that, what the book is meant to serve is that we're not telling our own stories.
Yeah.
So what now happens is that our young crop of entrepreneurs are now reading stories that don't apply to them.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So I started my Apple in a garage. Kilonde garage. We don't have garages.
Have a garage, yes.
Right? So in a garage is seen as a unit situation. Like, the smallest, if I want to say I started my business in the very smallest place in America,
Yes.
a garage is just
Is where you
say you be.
started.
Even musicians do it. A
Yeah.
garage band. They started, for us, we don't have that. Our own is village.
It's village or whiskey in the Jolag by way in some
Yes,
dodgy
exactly.
studio. Yeah.
Exactly. So that right there is already the wrong story, right? But if we have more books,
Yeah.
right? More books like this book.
So the person telling the story, was he Nigerian or?
No, it's,
Okay, so
he's American.
Yeah, but in his mind, he's,
Yeah.
gotcha.
No. He's American, telling the story in America. I was
Oh,
just listening
right.
to
Oh,
it
you were
on YouTube or something like that.
So what were you expecting to hear? That's his.
No, but that's before I discovered this problem.
Right.
This
I
is
see
me
what
looking
you
for
mean.
inspiration.
Oh, I see.
We
But you
read all
couldn't
the
relate
books.
to that.
Yeah, but
Gotcha.
when I heard that, for something, it clicked in my brain going,
Right.
this
This
guy
isn't it.
can't teach me much.
That's true.
Right? So it's a case of the environment itself is different. The arena itself is different.
Yeah.
And that is what creates, and then you also have a lot of opportunities, right? The adage that says innovation or necessity is the mother of innovation
innovation.
is not exactly
Exactly.
true here, right? Because there's some things that are just required. They're just raw.
Yes.
Like, you need water. So are you innovative because you
just need it.
you cleaned up water and put it in the bottle? No. So there are a lot of things that are not really necessarily innovative,
Right.
right? But they're
They're
needed.
just necessary and they're important.
Exactly. So like in a book, we give an example, and this is in the videos we did before the book came out.
Yeah.
One of my most favorite entrepreneurs is people who charge phones. Like,
That's innovative.
it's not innovative.
It's not.
What's innovative about putting power on a table and charging a phone? It's not
Well,
in this day
So
and age.
maybe what is innovation? Maybe that's where the.
So
the
innovation
discussion
is more so solving a problem, right? So that sounds like it's
exactly.
Yeah. You see, that's the thing. That's why I like that example, because we
Okay.
could argue
Yeah.
that it is, because there's a niche.
Right.
It's a business niche.
Exactly.
He's solving the problem. He put together a table. He connected wires. But how does that move us forward?
So beyond solving the problem,
It has to be moving us somewhere.
Propel you.
Right.
Okay,
So
makes sense.
if you are doing business in a place where things are not where they need to be, right? And you're solving. That's what you brought me there, right? So basically, that's the problem. He's spending his time solving a problem that he shouldn't be solving. Where, meanwhile, he probably could have been guided, probably created a new battery.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
He could have been the guy who could have created wireless charging. He could be the guy who could have created a new way of creating new energy. But he's actually spending his time. The first person who did
it's almost reactive. We have a problem.
There you go.
Or does it go beyond that?
Yeah. So, yes, it feels innovative because he's solving a problem. But is he really?
It's beyond that.
Yeah, is he really? I mean, power was created years ago. So you just move power to a new medium.
You just changed.
Yes. Don't get me wrong. It's amazing when I see it. And, I mean, I tell people all the time, there are different levels of entrepreneurs. And the people who wake up every morning to go just charge mobile phones, or the people who wake up every morning and to go sell shirts, and then a row of other people selling shirts next to them, are the real entrepreneurs, right? That is raw, right? That is like, you wake up every morning, and the money you're going to make for today, you're going to make it today. If you don't make it today, that's it.
And that's entrepreneurship?
That's the rawest sense of it.
Rawest form of it.
Yeah, the rawest sense of it. I joke around that there's some other people who are more ajepota entrepreneurs, but we won't go into that.
Okay, so essentially what you're saying is the African entrepreneurship journey is basically defined by the environment and as is with other clients. So the reason that we're able to tell the story differently is because our experiences are defined by the realities of our environment and what we make out of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
We don't have so much, and there's so much we need to do. So the introduction of the book actually speaks to, there's a section that speaks to focus. Right? So one of the biggest killers of African entrepreneur is losing focus because there's so much to do.
Yes, you're right,
There's so much to do. You could wake up one morning and go, hey, I want to do this. And it's the next day.
So I think there's too many problems to solve.
There you go.
Right?
Yes.
And while that's not a bad thing, so is the focus just being overwhelmed and not knowing which problem to focus on, or is it you get tired of trying to solve one particular problem and you think the solution is to jump to the next?
Well, I would say both, right? But what tends to happen is that we don't have a lot of human capital to spread around.
Right.
So if you're the entrepreneur, in most instances, even you yourself, you're not fully cooked. Right? So you're trying to do 5 different things. You yourself don't have the capacity and you don't have a good supporting cast across all 5 things. So look at me, with all my experience, everything I've touched has not really turned to gold. Right? Yeah, so if you go to, well, because for different reasons, business ideas fail.
Okay.
So like right now, one of the things that I'm pained about that I've not had time to get back to is that I started a foundation.
Okay.
Right? A charitable foundation, right? And it was meant to solve the problem of small companies doing charitable things.
Right.
Right? So when you're a startup, you don't really have time to now say, okay, let's do CSR.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the idea of this small idea was now be the CSR arm for all these small companies.
Startups. So that it's something that they started from the beginning and it grows with
They'll
them.
just put their name on it, right? So you give money or you give either yourself or time, right? So sorry, time or money.
Yeah.
Right? So either you come yourself with your team on one Saturday, this company is already set up for you. You guys are going to clean the bridge.
Yeah.
Right? And you all have your shirts on and you do it and then you go and put it on your own website.
So helping you do your social good.
Exactly. So that was the idea.
Right.
It hasn't really gone anywhere.
Why not?
Time. Right? So
going back to your book and focus.
So going back to the book and focus, it's a case of, because like you said, there's so many things to do, right? We'll have to get used to the idea that you may not be able to achieve them all.
Right.
And the time that was spent, the time and resources that was spent doing that thing, in some situations can derail your business.
Okay.
Right? So in my case, it didn't necessarily derail my business. What's now suffered is the great idea is not being executed.
Right.
Just sitting there kind of in ice.
Right.
Right? That's what's suffering. But for some other people, it could very well be that it derails them from what they're supposed to be doing.
Right.
Right? So that's the problem. Right? So somewhere there's going to be a fail where you can't really manage all these balls in the air. And it's all a case of, actually, it's not even balls, it's eggs. It's not a case of which one drops.
Which one drops, because it's a major. So what's the advice? So how are you preaching focus to entrepreneurs if you say that's the problem? How?
It's one of the problems, but I would say it's critical to focus on what you're working on. Right? If you believe, so, there's a number of things that qualifies.
So just basically stay on track. Don't
bounce around. If there's any other better way to say it. I mean, it's because the thing is, there's so many things to solve. right? Because in Nigeria,
True.
you can wake up in the morning and be an oil guy, and then by afternoon you are running a clinic,
sure,
and by evening you are doing cargo.
I mean, but that's what you do. Yes, you're in so many different parts of in different sectors, industries.
No, but a lot of times they all so let me example of this. Yeah, okay. they tied in. So you remember in the beginning of this conversation, you said, "Should I introduce you with your government?"
Correct.
And I said, "I'm beginning to learn that I'm living the reality of what I said I'm going to do."
Right. Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm. So it's not really different. It feels that way, right? So a lot of times, when people do things, it's driven by a certain purpose.
Yes.
Right?
So there's a core. There's something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if I said years ago that I love entrepreneurs and I've always tried to help entrepreneurs, and I've been mentoring so many entrepreneurs, and then I write a book.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. And the book is to do what?
Talk about entrepreneurship.
And to help entrepreneurship. So when you may see that it's all over the place, there's a line
I actually do see it.
that brings it all together. And then I take on this government role, sabbatical with the government.
Policy.
And the very first thing I'm doing is what now?
A bill.
To do what?
For startups.
There you go. So it's all in line, right?
Fantastic.
So, but sometimes you don't see when it's forming.
Yeah,
because
I agree.
Because you're sitting it's like you're sitting on a rapids and it's just taking you. But if you are somewhat true to yourself.
Or you step outside and just see.
Yeah, and then you see how it's forming.
How it's coming together. Cool. I like that. So another interesting part in the book is you talked about SMEs being the backbone of any economy, but in Africa, they tend to become the ground that big corporations walk on. And when I read this part, and the example that you gave, it was so interesting. And I would like for you to just, expand on that in terms of what you mean by the big corporations walking on SMEs. Well, it's in the book.
Yeah. So, you don't need one big company or 5 big companies. You need hundreds, thousands of smaller companies, right? So one of my more recent vision statements, as it relates to the formation, the bill's been forming and I've been interacting with the tech ecosystem, is that I would love startups to start. People are now saying, I started my startup in my village, right? And not necessarily potentially move.
I like that. So that's the narrative, right?
Yeah, basically. I want startups
so
started in the village.
In fact, I see it. So you know how, sorry to just digress, you know how the Americans say they started in the garage?
Exactly.
So this is the narrative.
That's exactly where it came from.
Original.
Yeah, so our startup started in our villages. Right. I want my startup started in my village. So, and then not just to have unicorns, right? Fantastic. We have like 5 of them now.
Yeah.
Let's move it to 70 something. India has 70 something. India in 2021 had 30 unicorns.
Wow.
30 companies became unicorns in India in 2021. So let's grow our unicorns. But beyond that, let's have thousands of smaller companies that actually are nowhere near unicorns, but are hiring 20 people, 30 people, and they're creating value.
Job creation.
Right?
Yeah.
So now, when it comes to doing business in Nigeria, the book goes into it. There's a lot of different problems, from tax people to somebody coming to your front gate and saying you didn't clean the gutter that they're supposed to clean, to it's just all kinds of stuff. A lot of rent seeking. These are no secrets, right? We all know them.
Yeah.
That is one set of problems. Now, if you speak to any entrepreneur, a lot of entrepreneurs, they will talk to you about just payments. Right?
That's true.
You will find that there's almost no entrepreneur, well, let me not generalize, but a lot of entrepreneurs will talk to you about, they may not use the term cash conversion circles, right? But they will give you an example of what they're going through on the cash flow. Yeah. That if you understand cash conversion circles, you see what's happening to them.
Yeah.
So this is actually in the book. I was sitting through one thing a lot of people don't understand is that business is a science. Right? And we just casually go into it.
Yeah.
And we never think that we need to study. Right? We don't read the right books.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're not reading the right books, you're not studying, and then you're wondering why you're having problems. Right? I read books that I on purpose read to solve the problem. Like, okay, I think this is an issue.
Right.
What kind of book would help? Have conversation with people and they'll say, listen to this podcast.
Right.
Read this book. Okay. Podcasts have become something that actually they wedge in, right?
Yeah.
So you listen to a podcast of like some business person, like this is businesswoman. I just listened to a podcast recently that I think most women should listen to. It's fantastic.
Okay, tell me.
When I remember, I'll tell you. Oh no, yes. It's the lady the GM lady. I forget her name. Is it Vera? Anyway, GM lady. Just GM lady. There's a podcast about her. Yeah. Fantastic.
Okay.
So, you read these books to help you because it's a science and you really should study it. So here I am sitting in this, a friend invites me to the Harvard Business School meeting.
Yeah.
And they had this Harvard professor that they all know. He's famous, I guess he's very insightful. And he starts to draw out cash conversion circles. And I've never heard the phrase before because I didn't go to business school, right? And I found myself almost alarmed.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's what's happening to me, right? So for those that don't know, cash conversion circles is basically is basically the period between where you pay somebody and when you'll get paid. Right? So if you're in a business where you basically get paid by a bigger company and then you now pay smaller contractors.
Yeah.
If the guy pays you 1 million and then you have to now pay several payments of 200K, that middle, the shorter you make it, the better for you.
Of course.
The longer it is, the worse for you.
The more stressful it is.
Yes. But when that's being done to you by a larger company, not necessarily because they have cash flow problems, just because they probably manage it, we're not going to pay you. And then there'll be drama and there'll be this. It destroys smaller businesses.
Of course.
Yeah. It's one of the biggest problems. Like, it's one of those problems that if we solved it, smaller business would thrive. Right? I mean, there's so many examples of,
But I mean, why? What is it about the large corporates? Is it out of just not taking the smaller businesses as seriously, or just them also trying to manage?
I think it's a case of them also trying to manage their cash flow.
Okay. I think that's what it is. To be honest.
To a big part.
They can't wait as much.
Yeah, but it may get to the point where it's not value generating. So I know people who, during COVID, closed down parts of their businesses that bigger companies rely on. And if that business, like for instance, this particular one I'm thinking about is a support business.
Right.
Now, if that support business does not exist, the support for the equipment they need to now go for a more expensive.
It costs a lot.
But nobody's thinking about that.
They're just thinking about money. Yeah.
So if you are destroying this arm, people are losing jobs. They're not going to be there to support you when you need it. They used to show up right immediately and solve the problem. Now you have to now start calling some hotline and getting support from wherever, and they're not going to get here tomorrow because they have to fly in. Nobody weighs that out.
That's true.
So when you now spread that across,
because everybody just sort of focuses on that one thing and not see the bigger picture.
So I particularly think there needs to be sort of a payment system.
Okay.
Right? So payment is it's big enough to talk about it like we are right now.
Yeah.
Because I mean, most entrepreneurs I've spoken to, once they start talking, when the payment thing comes, you just see they say all the same reaction. Yeah. So I think it is enough of a need there to set up a payment system. Okay. Something that makes payment happen, even if it's just closer to the contract. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Something that, and especially in the environment, here's the one thing.
So when you say payment system, what exactly? Because I'm thinking, I have a small business-ish and we do invoices, right? And then you get like reminders. So if you issue the invoice to someone, it's timed for them to get a reminder that, this invoice is pending. Is that?
No, it's beyond that.
It's beyond that.
So interesting. So this is why podcasts are great. Right.
Yes.
So I just listened to a podcast on cryptocurrency.
Right. Okay.
I'm still listening to it.
Okay.
And they were talking about Ethereum. Right.
Okay.
So Ether. So before these things became asset classes, really, Ethereum was actually developed as a blockchain contract.
Okay.
Right. So you and I go into a contract where we say, I have done this service for you and you're going to pay me, but we do it on a blockchain. Right? And I can see that using the blockchain, you can now instigate the payment. Let me stop there because it's actually a very good idea. Right? So no, it's actually a good business idea. So we're not going to be doing it over the radio. So the thing is, right? Yeah. The thing is that if you have a way of automating the payment, so there's no human interaction in it. If the work is done and you sign that it's done, then your payment should be made. Right? Then also think about the hedging, because it's not even is the work done. A lot of time payment is not about the work done, not the work done. It's the human part that makes, So if you also look at the part that a lot of people miss, hedging.
Yeah.
Right? So you get a contract. The contract is for 100 million naira. When you got the contract, 100 million naira was $500,000. You start doing the work. Naira dollar does their dance.
And then everything, the cost changes completely.
Somebody should be hedging.
Yeah.
Right? Do you know currently who hedges?
Who?
The vendor. The vendor is the one that's hedging. And the vendor is not in the position to hedge. So that makes everything more expensive.
Yeah.
So if the laptop is really $500, you are forced to price it at $800 because between this time and the time you get paid, it may shift.
Yeah.
So the truth, man, a lot of things would be cheaper if we had some kind of mechanism to say, looking at the naira dollar, it's quite possible it's going to shift.
Let's just.
I owe you 3 million naira. By the time I'll convert it to FX, by the time I pay you, I still owe you 3 million naira, but
it hasn't changed. The value.
But I'll pay you the value, the new value of what the converted FX is in the new naira.
Interesting.
Nobody loses any money.
So why hasn't this happened?
Should I drink my water? Asking me spiritual questions.
Oh gosh. Okay, that's interesting. So this is entrepreneurship in Africa, and we're getting some of the peculiarities. So would you say that this is something peculiar to, is it Nigeria, is it Africa, is it global?
I wouldn't dare speak for the world, but I know that there are systems in place. Like for England, for instance. I mean, I have vendors, in a number of European countries, and I know that I can't owe them money. You understand me?
Why do you know you can't?
I mean, you have credit, right? I think in England, I'm not the one who deals with this, but in England, I think there's a system where you actually can report it. Right? So there's systems in place. You just can't go around owing people money in England, right? Once they put in the system, I think you can't even get credit from anybody else.
That's part of the
so that's part of the issue, right?
That's part of the issue.
So it needs to be systemic.
Yeah, and that's why you're where you are, and the startup build that you're doing to influence these kind of things. Correct. Oh gosh, you know what, I could go on. I think that maybe we have just a few more minutes for you to share a recommendation that you think, in fact, 2 recommendations that you think can foster successful and sustainable entrepreneurship in Africa. 2 recommendations? If you can't do 2, you can do 1. Too many? Or you have a lot more? Two recommendations. So no, let me not waste the time just cracking up about the fact that you think it's 2. So, like I said... No, I'm sure there's a lot more, but your top 2. Yeah, I mean, business is a science, right? So respect it for that, right? Understand that, the key difference between an entrepreneur and intrapreneur, right, is risk. Okay. Right? That's the only difference, right? So I could be an entrepreneur and I'll come work for African Business Radio. Right. It doesn't mean that actually African Business Radio will gain from my entrepreneurial, approach to things, right? That's a great hire. Right. But the minute I go out and you're exposed and decide that I'm going to do an idea, is a statement, by yourself. Right? It's a very strong statement that says that this thing that I'm about to do is, and I have a vision for, is going to feed me. Very, very basic, right? So it's important that you understand that it's a risk thing. Okay. That you're taking a very big risk. Right. And the risk being that you starve to death. It's plain simple. Okay. Right. So I make jokes all the time, like, I've been doing this for 15 years. I can't believe for 15 years I've been waking up every January and go, let's go again. Right? It seems insane. Yeah. Right? And of course, other things, life moves on. You're building a family on this, a number of other things. So I would say that, it's critical to, one, understand why you're doing it. Important. Right? I agree. Right? I wouldn't even say it has to be part of your purpose and because but just even know the why. Yeah, but I think, know the why, because I think the purpose thing, I think sometimes you have to go through a number of things to get to what your purpose. So this may just be one of the things on your belt. Yeah. Right? So this is the idea of the toolkit. Right? And then I think it's also really important that you understand your environment. Very important, I agree. Yeah. So it's critical that you understand your environment. I think everything else falls into that. Right. So you understand why you're doing it, and then you also understand the environment that you're operating in. Right. So this brings in the whole idea of VUCA, and what level of volatility you're dealing with, what level of complexity you're dealing with, and so forth. Uncertainty. Yeah. So if you take that in cognizant, that look, this is what I'm dealing with. This is the environment I'm doing it in. Operating in. This is where I want. Like for instance, when I came to Nigeria to start my business, I mean, it was something that I had passion from when I was working in Goldman Sachs. I was sitting in Goldman Sachs, looking at Nigeria and say, wow, I see that opportunity. What am I going to do? So I started taking frequent trips, coming to Nigeria. I'm in Nigeria in April. I'm in Nigeria in, I come to Nigeria for a weekend. Learning, meeting people, right? So you have to be intentional about it. So meeting people, learning the environment, would this business make sense? Who else is doing it? And so forth. Before you take that step. Even taking that step, it wasn't really taking that step. I came and I took a job. Why? Because I still needed to understand the environment, learn who's selling what, who offers this service, where are the opportunities in the market, who's not doing what, right? And 15 years later, we're still doing
the same set of things I wanted to do when I was a much younger person. You know, being overpaid.
Overpaid. I remember that's in the book. I mean, so what I hear you say is know why you're doing what you're doing, understand the lay of the land, and that's essentially, you know, those two are very important to actually starting. It's
a science.
Yeah.
If you treat business as an art form, you'll get in trouble. It's not.
But isn't it a combination, no?
The art of business, yes. The fluidity of it, the beauty of it, and so forth.
Yeah.
But it's really driven by science.
That's the foundation. It's like the
art.
anchor.
Do you know art students are actually very good mathematicians?
Okay.
Yeah, people. Yeah. If you find a lot of artists, because when you start doing proportionality on a piece of board, you are doing math in real time.
But they're not thinking of it in that way, no?
They may not be.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you mean.
But you run into people who actually know the connection.
Yes.
Right? They'll be like brilliant mathematicians, but they want to paint.
Yeah.
Right? You're like, I paint and I'm really good at math. So.
Okay. Interesting. Well, thank you very much. That was fun and enlightening. As always, it's always good to have these conversations with you. Thank you for sharing with our listeners, and to our listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of NextGen Talks. Catch you on the next episode.
NextGen Talks is an initiative of PwC Nigeria's NextGen Club, featuring family business owners, NextGens, successful entrepreneurs, and professionals. NextGen Talks, shaping the African family business narrative.